Earlier this week, we learned of a brand new position from famed short seller, I guess we could say, Micheal Burry, coming out revealing that not only is he short Apple, he has been short Apple since Q1 of this year. This was the note that we saw earlier in the week, indicating that, in fact, Micheal Burry, guys, has a short position using options in Apple. This is not the first time that he has done this. The most important part and the most important question we can ask here is, does this mean Apple is now a buy?
Part of what got released in the 13F filings was that he'd been buying a few names as well. And I think if you consider, so he was buying some Alphabet and buying some Meta, and I think it was maybe Bristol Myers and a couple of interesting names there. But what they have in common, at least the first two have in common, that Apple doesn't, is if you think about the valuations of both those names, like Meta being like a 14 right now, so already in the teens, and Google just barely above that, barely above the 20s, and the Ford PE under 16, and Apple, relatively speaking, is still a little bit expensive. So from that perspective, it actually made some sense what he was trying to accomplish there. He's saying, okay, well, I want to pick the value names to be dip buying, but the one that had held up, and that is Apple. If you just, this entire time, going back until, the beginning of May, you were still trying to hold on to the 200 period moving average. In January, Apple was still just churning away off of higher lows, back at 180, and really had been driving the market to the upside. And then you start to consider, I know we'll probably talk about some of the headwinds that they face with China and supply chain. And when you throw that in there, it was a bit of a measured move. So I don't know if it's as simple to say that that's the bottom, because if memory serves, I think when that Tesla trade got put on and some of the other shorts that Micheal Burry had, when those got taken out, that actually ended up being the top. Mm-hmm. Like he seemed to have it close to right, and again, it's only good in horseshoes and grenades. But he seemed to have it close to the top, and he seemed to be just about right. And if he, to put that trade on in early January, and he had it good. Right, and obviously we don't know where he plans to get out or whatnot, but that's essentially about that top. And there's room to go to the downside on the SPY. My guess is that some of that has probably been covered, but we don't know for sure.
All right, so yeah, it's very, very interesting about that Tesla talk with Micheal Burry. And look, this is Apple, and I think when you're talking about Apple, you need to just keep it real as much as you possibly can. And honestly, I have a weekly time frame out here now, so this chart, in my opinion, is much more appropriate here for Apple to have a quick look, okay? Like, my big discussion about it was here, in June, right down here where we dipped down, of 2019, Apple's PE was 15, okay? It started just to accelerate. Obviously, you have some dip downs here. This is COVID, dip down to 60 bucks, okay? Like, Apple was $60 at COVID time. We went up to 180, okay? Almost in a straight line, as did the whole market. When this happened, of course, they started to add some of those services. They added Apple TV. The Apple Watch started going off as well. So it got re-rated a little bit, right? So it became not just a hardware company, but sort of like a lifelong, commitment for people through iTunes, buying the watches, investing in, like I just said there, Apple TV. They're talking about Apple Fitness. They've released a whole bunch of stuff. So it became much more of like a subscription-based model that they were trying to focus on. So what wound up happening is, as of the first quarter, and even right now, Apple's PE is 25. So you go from 15 down here back in 2019, and we're only in 2022. So you go back 2-3 years, you're 15, 16, 17 PE. Now all of a sudden, Apple comes out and is now at 25, and this is where he shorted. Look, they became on January, I wrote it down here, January 3rd, right? Apple, which is up right in here, became $3 trillion at 184. I believe the price was 183 something, was a $3 trillion company. To me, that sparked people to start to look into it. This is the first $3 trillion company. What maybe are some holes here to bring this stock down? And let's talk about it. On April 28th, right? So you're right into here. Remember, this is a weekly chart. So you're right into here. Apple came out with earnings that actually beat the market, right? So they came out with 158 versus 142, but they warned about China's slowdown, and we know China's zero COVID policy. That shut down their factories over there in China. Not only that, it also to shut down retail over in China. Plus, you have a lot of the U.S. companies, the store in New York, so on and so forth, going through changes. There is a little bit of labor discussion there on the U.S. side as well for their Apple stores. So I feel like there are some headwinds, but there's also tailwinds involved with Apple. So 17.86% of Michael Burry's holdings, you mentioned that he was going long, were puts. So they're puts in the form of a short, right? So whenever you have puts, you're short the stock. They were put on early in the first quarter. We don't know when they're off. So when you have puts and then you have a dramatic move, Brendan, like we're seeing right here, down to 133, I believe he's won. This is a win for him. So where does he cover? I mean, I would think that if you go all the way back a year, back into last April, you're here at 130 again. So I think like this is close. We're at 133 right now for Apple. So I'll move this chart away. Here's a more recent daily. So if he's got puts on that are somewhere in the first quarter, this is the first quarter. So now that's a monster win, especially with Apple. They wouldn't have been that expensive. So I think he rings the register. So to answer your question, is this a bottom for Apple? I mean, the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ are going to say no. But as far as possibly Michael Burry covering, I would think that as smart as he is, there's probably been some covers here. So I think like, you know, this is probably a good spot to start to nibble in one of the best companies out there.
It's not the first time we've heard this story, and it won't be the last. We're going to have to wait a couple months, though, to actually see where this position is for him. But is, in fact, Apple a buy? When isn't Apple a buy? Let's be honest.